Captain Han Doyen stared at the dead screens in front of him. The bridge of the Eternal Dawn was dark except for emergency lights that cast red shadows across frightened faces. Outside the viewports, stars hung motionless in the black void. They had been drifting for 5 weeks now, and everyone knew what that meant. Life support is down to 40%, reported Lieutenant Quan Hyejin from her station. Her voice was steady, but Doyen could see her hands shaking. We have maybe 1 more week. 2 if we reduce oxygen to minimum levels. Doyen nodded slowly. 50,000 people were on this ship. 50,000 colonists who had left Earth behind to start fresh on a new world. Now they would die in the darkness between stars and no one would even know where to find their bodies. Keep broadcasting the distress signal, he said quietly. Someone might hear it. No one believed that anymore. They were too far from any known settlement. The engine failure had happened in the worst possible location, in a region of space where no ships traveled. But Doyen would keep broadcasting until the very end, because that was his duty. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Park Ji-woo worked through another shift without sleep. Sick colonists filled every bed. Some had injuries from when the engines exploded. Others were simply sick from stress and fear, and the slowly failing life support systems. Ji-woo moved between them with calm efficiency, but inside his heart was breaking. A little girl named Yoon Hana sat on one of the beds. She was only 8 years old, small for her age with bright eyes that seemed too large for her thin face. She was drawing pictures with the last of the colored pencils from the school supplies. "What are you drawing?" Ji-woo asked her gently. Hana held up the paper. She had drawn the eternal dawn surrounded by stars. Stick figures with smiling faces looked out the windows. "I'm drawing us finding help," she said simply. "My mom says we should never stop hoping." Ji-woo felt tears burn his eyes, but he smiled at her. "Your mom is a wise woman. Will we really die, Dr. Park?" Hana asked. Her voice was curious, not frightened. Children sometimes understood terrible things better than adults did. "I don't know," Ji-woo told her honestly. "But we're not dead yet." In the engine room, Choi Minho slammed his fist against a broken console. The young engineer had been trying for 5 weeks to repair the damaged drive systems. He was brilliant, everyone said so. He had graduated top of his class. But brilliance meant nothing when you didn't have the parts or the power to fix what was broken. "It's not your fault," said Engineer Park Nari, who had worked with him every day since the disaster. "I should have seen the problem," Minho said bitterly. "I should have caught it during the inspection before we left Earth. 50,000 people are going to die because I missed something." "The flaw was in the manufacturing," Nari reminded him. "No one could have seen it. The investigation report said so." "The investigation report doesn't matter now," Minho said. He looked at the dead engines with hatred and despair. "None of it matters if we all die out here." On the 6th week, Captain Doyen stood before the assembled colonists in the main hall. He had called them together because they deserved to know the truth. The hall was packed with families, children, elderly people who had sold everything they owned for a chance at a new life. Now he had to tell them there would be no new life. "We have 3 days of life support remaining," he said clearly. "I want you to know that the crew has done everything possible to save this ship. If there was a way, we would have found it. I'm sorry that I couldn't bring you to safety. I'm sorry that your journey ends here." Silence filled the hall. Some people cried. Others sat in numb shock. A few parents held their children close and whispered that everything would be all right, even though everyone knew it wouldn't be. Then little Hana stood up. She was so small that people barely noticed her at first, but her voice carried in the quiet room. "Captain Doyen," she called out. "Are we still broadcasting the signal?" "Yes," Doyen said. "Every minute until the power runs out." "Then someone might still hear us," Hana said with absolute confidence. "We shouldn't give up while we're still broadcasting." Her simple faith made something crack in Doyen's chest. He nodded. "You're right. While we broadcast, there's hope." The colonists left the hall quietly. They returned to their quarters to wait. Some prayed. Some wrote final messages for loved ones back on Earth, even though those messages would never be sent. Others simply held each other and tried to be brave. Dr. Ji-woo worked through the night in the medical bay. He gave comfort to the sick and helped people manage their fear. When Hana's mother brought her daughter in for a regular checkup, Ji-woo noticed the girl still carried her drawings. "Can I see?" he asked. Hana showed him a new picture. This one showed the Eternal Dawn next to another ship. The other ship was strange-looking, not like human vessels. Stick figures were shaking hands between the two ships. "Who are they?" Jiwoo asked, pointing at the strange ship. "The people who are going to help us," Hana said confidently. "I don't know what they look like yet, so I just drew their ship different." Jiwoo wanted to tell her that no help was coming. He wanted to prepare her for the end, but looking at her hopeful face, he couldn't destroy that hope. Maybe hope was all any of them had left. On the morning of the third day, Lieutenant Heejin was monitoring the dying systems when her screen flickered. She stared at it, not believing her eyes. Then she began to shake. "Captain," she whispered. Then louder, "Captain Doyen." Doyen rushed to her station. "What is it?" "Sensor contact," Heejin said, her voice breaking. "A ship just appeared at extreme range. They're changing course toward us." The bridge erupted in activity. Officers who had been sitting in despair suddenly moved with desperate energy. Doyen leaned over the sensor display, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break. "Can you identify them?" he demanded. "No, sir. The ship configuration doesn't match any human design. It's not in our database." "Alien. They were about to make first contact with an alien species while their ship was dying and their people were hours from death." Doyen didn't know if this was salvation or simply a different kind of ending. But it was something. After 6 weeks of darkness and silence, something had answered their call. "Open all communication channels," Doyen ordered. "Broadcast on every frequency. Let them know we're here and we need help." Throughout the ship, word spread like fire. An alien vessel was approaching. No one knew what it meant. Parents held their children. The sick raised their heads from their beds. Engineers stood together in the darkness of the engine room. And little Hana clutched her drawing of 2 ships meeting in space, her eyes bright with vindication. The unknown ship grew larger on the sensors, approaching steadily through the dark. Humanity held its breath and waited to see what would happen when a dying species met the unknown. In the cold mathematics of space, 50,000 lives hung in the balance, and everything depended on what came next. Governor Lee Jisoo stood before the memorial hall and watched the morning sun rise over New Haven. 67 years had passed since the eternal dawn limped into orbit around this world, and the colony had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. 2 million people now called this planet home. Cities stretched across green valleys, farms covered the plains, and the spaceport buzzed with trade ships from a dozen different worlds. But Jisoo never forgot how close they had come to extinction. No one on New Haven ever forgot. She walked into the memorial hall, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. In the center of the room, protected by a transparent case, sat the crystalline data core that the Talviri had given them. It still glowed with a soft blue light even after all these years. Around it, holographic displays showed images from that desperate first contact so long ago. There was Captain Doyen, looking exhausted but hopeful as he shook hands with Valaner. There was Dr. Jiwoo treating colonists with strange Talviri medical equipment. There was young engineer Minho working alongside crystal-skinned aliens to repair engines that everyone thought were beyond saving. And there was little Hana, presenting her drawing to the Talviri commander with a bright smile. Jisoo had never met the Talviri. She had been born here on New Haven, granddaughter of survivors from the Eternal Dawn. But she had grown up with the stories. Every child on New Haven knew about the day the aliens came and saved them. Every year on Salvation Day, the entire planet stopped to remember and give thanks. "Governor," a voice called. Admiral Kim Taeyang entered the hall, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. "We need to talk." Jisoo turned to face him. Taeyang commanded New Haven's defense fleet, such as it was. They had a dozen patrol ships and a few armed freighters. Nothing impressive by galactic standards, but enough to protect their trade routes from pirates. "What's wrong?" she asked, reading the tension in his face. "Trade Captain Song came back from the core worlds yesterday," Taeyang said. "The news isn't good. The Talviri have gone silent." Jisoo felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What do you mean, silent?" "No Talviri ships have been seen in any known systems for 3 years. Their homeworlds don't respond to communications. The Galactic Council is saying they might be extinct." The word hung in the air like a curse. Extinct. The gentle people who had saved humanity when they had nothing to gain from it, who had shared their resources and knowledge freely, who had pointed them toward this beautiful world and asked for nothing in return. Gone. "That can't be right," Jisoo said. "They had 7 homeworlds, colonies throughout their region of space. How could they all just disappear? I don't know, Taeyang admitted. But Captain Song said the council has given up looking. They say it's not worth the resources to investigate. Jisoo felt anger flash through her. Not worth the resources? The Talviri saved us. The council doesn't care about that, Taeyang said quietly. Most species barely know who the Talviri were. They were peaceful. They didn't control valuable territory and they weren't politically important. So the galaxy has moved on. Jisoo walked to the crystalline core and placed her hand against the case. Inside, the blue light pulsed gently like a heartbeat. We haven't moved on. We can't. That afternoon, Jisoo called an emergency meeting of the Planetary Council. The council chamber filled with representatives from every major city and settlement. Professor Shin Yunji arrived with her archive of Talviri records. Corporal Kang Minji, one of their best young pilots, stood at attention near the door. Jisoo laid out everything they knew. The Talviri silence, the council's indifference, the possibility that humanity's saviors were dead or dying somewhere in the galaxy. We need to find them, she said firmly. We need to send an expedition. The council chamber erupted in argument. Councillor Park Daehyun stood up, his face red with frustration. Governor, be reasonable. We're talking about sending our defense fleet across half the galaxy on a rescue mission that might be pointless. The Talviri could be dead. Even if they're not, we don't know where they are or what happened to them. We have the navigation data in the core, Professor Yunji interjected. She had maintained the Talviri records for decades, treating them like sacred texts. We know where their homeworlds are located. We can find them. And do what? Another counselor demanded. We have 12 patrol ships. If something dangerous enough to destroy the Talviri is out there, what makes you think we can help? Admiral Taeyang stepped forward. I'll go. Give me the fleet and volunteers and I'll find out what happened to them. You're willing to risk the entire defense fleet? Counselor Park asked incredulously. What if pirates attack while our ships are gone? What if you never come back? Jisoo looked around the chamber at the arguing representatives. She understood their fear. New Haven had grown prosperous and safe. Why risk that for aliens they had never met? Then she saw the elderly woman sitting quietly in the visitors' gallery. Yoon Hana, now 75 years old, still came to every council meeting. She still carried, carefully preserved in a crystal frame, the drawing she had made as a child aboard the Eternal Dawn. Counselors, Jisoo said loudly, silencing the arguments. I want to tell you a story. 67 years ago, our ancestors were dying in space. They had maybe hours left to live. An alien ship appeared, commanded by people they had never met from a species they knew nothing about. Those aliens could have passed by. They could have said it wasn't their problem. They could have decided that saving 50,000 humans wasn't worth the resources. She pointed at the memorial hall visible through the chamber windows. But Velinor didn't make that calculation. He saw people who needed help and he helped them. He gave them medicine, energy, parts for their engines, and directions to a new home. He saved every single person on that ship. Professor Yunji stood up, her voice passionate. For 67 years, we've told ourselves that we're the people who remember. We teach our children about the debt we owe. We say that humanity's character is defined not by what we gain, but by how we treat those who helped us. Was that all just words, or did we mean it? Silence fell over the chamber. Counselor Park sat down slowly, his face troubled. Others looked away, ashamed. Then Yoon Hana stood up. She was old now, her hair white and her movements slow, but her voice was still clear. May I speak? Of course, Jisoo said gently. Hana walked slowly to the center of the chamber, holding her framed drawing. I was 8 years old when I made this picture. I drew it because I believed someone would come save us. When Velinor saw it, he cried, not because it was beautiful, but because he said it showed him that kindness creates hope, and hope is the most important thing in the universe. She held up the drawing so everyone could see the stick figures of humans and Talviri together under stars. He told me to keep this so I would always remember that different people can help each other. He said that was his species' greatest belief. How those people might be dying somewhere, scared and alone, just like we were. Are we going to pass by and say it's not our problem? No one answered. The shame in the chamber was thick enough to touch. I'm old, Hana continued. I probably won't live to see our ships come back. But I need to know before I die that we at least tried. Because if we don't, then everything the Talviri believed about kindness and hope was wrong. And I refuse to let that be true. She sat down heavily and the chamber remained silent. Finally, Admiral Taeyang spoke. I need volunteers. Crew members who understand this might be a one-way trip. We're going into unknown space to face unknown dangers. But we're going because 67 years ago someone did the same for us. Corporal Minji stepped forward immediately. I'll go, sir. I'm coming too, Professor Yunji said. Someone needs to navigate using the Talviri data. More voices called out from around the chamber. Pilots, engineers, medical staff, soldiers. Within minutes, Taeyang had more volunteers than he had ships. Governor Jisoo looked at her council. All in favor of authorizing Operation Starlight Memory? Hands rose slowly, one by one, until every councilor had voted yes. Even Councilor Park, though his hand shook. 3 weeks later, 12 warships and their support vessels prepared to launch from New Haven's orbital stations. Admiral Taeyang stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the planet below. It was beautiful, green and blue and alive, a world given to humanity by alien kindness. Professor Yunji approached with the crystalline data core. They had carefully extracted the Talviri navigation data and loaded it into the ship's computers. The course is set, she said. 6 months travel if we push the engines hard. Then we push hard, Taeyang said. He opened a communication channel to all ships. This is Admiral Taeyang. 67 years ago, the Talviri saved us without asking what they would gain. Today we go to find them, to help them or at least to know what happened. We're not doing this for strategy or politics. We're doing it because it's right, because we're humanity and we remember. All ships engage drives. The fleet accelerated away from New Haven, 12 small ships heading into the vast unknown. Behind them, 2 million people watched and prayed, and in the memorial hall, the crystalline core pulsed with blue light, as if the Talviri somehow knew help was finally coming. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace into hell. Corporal Kang Minji sat in her scout ship's cockpit and stared at the screens in horror. 3 planets burned in the distance, their atmospheres torn apart by orbital bombardment. Debris fields spread across the system where space stations used to be. And everywhere there were bodies. Talviri ships drifted dead in space, their beautiful crystal hulls shattered and dark. Admiral, she whispered into her communications link. Are you seeing this? On the flagship, Admiral Kim Taeyang gripped his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white. He had prepared himself for many possibilities. But not this. Never this. All ships full alert, he ordered. Weapons online. Minji, take your scouts ahead. Find survivors. The scout ships darted forward into the graveyard of a civilization. Minji's hands shook on the controls as she maneuvered between floating wreckage. These had been homes, she realized. Ships where Talviri families lived and worked. Now they were tombs. Contact, called Lieutenant Park Sun-woo from another scout. I've got a weak power signature. Sending coordinates. Minji turned her ship toward the signal. There, hidden in the shadow of a broken space station, was a small Talviri vessel. Its hull was damaged, life support failing, but someone was still alive inside. This is Corporal Minji of the human fleet. She broadcast on all frequencies. We're here to help. Please respond. For a long moment, nothing. Then a voice, weak and disbelieving, spoke in heavily accented human language. Human, you are. Human? Yes, Minji said, her throat tight. We came looking for the Talviri. Can we bring you aboard our ship? The Talviri vessel's airlock opened. Minji docked carefully with the damaged ship and cycled through to find a single Talviri inside. She was tall and slender. Her crystalline skin cracked and dulled by injury and starvation, but her eyes, large and opalescent, filled with tears when she saw Minji. I am Velmari, she said in a trembling voice. Why are you here? How did you find us? We came because 67 years ago your people saved us, Minji said simply. A Talviri named Velinor helped a human colony ship. We never forgot. Velmari swayed on her feet. Minji caught her before she fell, shocked at how light the alien was. Velinor was my great-grandfather, Velmari whispered. He died 15 years ago. He told us stories about the humans until the end. He said you gave him hope that compassion existed beyond our kind. Minji helped Velmari back to her scout ship and gave her water and emergency rations. The Talviri ate slowly as if she had forgotten what food tasted like. What happened here? Minji asked gently. The Vryn, Velmari said, hatred filling her voice for the first time. They are an empire of insect warriors. They came 5 years ago demanding we surrender our crystal technology. When we refused, they began exterminating us. World by world, colony by colony. We had no real military, We are. We were a peaceful people. How many of you are left? Maybe 400,000, scattered across the system in hiding. The Vryn hunt us for sport now. We have weeks left, maybe days. Velmari looked at Minji with those huge, sad eyes. You should leave. The Vryn fleet is massive. If they find you helping us, they will kill you too. We didn't come all this way to leave, Minji said firmly. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Taeyang. Sir, I have a Talviri survivor. She says there are 400,000 more in hiding, and we've got company coming. Species called the Vryn. Professor Shin Yunji was on the flagship working with the navigation systems when she heard the news. The Vryn. She searched the galactic databases and found limited information. An aggressive species from the far reaches. Insectoid, expansionist, hostile to most peaceful civilizations. Admiral Taeyang assembled his command staff. Options? We're outnumbered, said Commander Baek Jun. Intelligence suggests the Vryn have at least 40 warships in this system. We have 12. We need to evacuate the Talviri, said Dr. Osumin, the fleet's chief medical officer. Get them on our ships and run. 400,000 people. Commander Baek shook his head. Our ships can't carry that many. It would take weeks to evacuate them all. Then we buy weeks, Taeyang said quietly. Everyone stared at him. Sir? Commander Baek said carefully. That would mean fighting a defensive action against superior forces. We might not survive. We knew this was a possibility when we volunteered, Taeyang replied. He looked around at his officers. Every person on these ships chose to come. We came because the Talviri saved us once. Now it's our turn. On the damaged Talviri vessel, Velmari was reading through a salvaged datapad. It contained her great-grandfather's journals, preserved all these years. She found the entry from the day he met the humans and read it aloud to Minji. Today we saved a species called humans, 50,000 of them, drifting in a broken ship. Captain Doyen thanked me with tears in his eyes. A child named Hana gave me a drawing of our two species together. She said she knew someone would come help them. I told her to keep the drawing to remember that compassion connects all beings. Tonight I feel hope. In this vast, often cruel galaxy, there are still those who believe in kindness. Perhaps we are not alone in our ideals after all. Velmari looked up from the pad, tears streaming down her face. He never stopped talking about you. About the humans who drew pictures and said thank you. About Captain Doyen who broadcast distress signals until the very end because he had hope. My great-grandfather believed that meeting humanity proved the universe was fundamentally good. And now humans have traveled across the galaxy to find you, Minji said softly. Because he was right. Compassion does connect us. The Vryn fleet detected the human presence within hours. War Master Hraktal commanded the invasion force from his massive battleship. When his sensors showed human vessels among the Talviri debris, he was confused and then amused. He opened a communication channel to the human flagship. I am War Master Hraktal of the Vryn Dominion. You are human vessels far from your territory. Leave immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Taeyang's face appeared on the screen. Hraktal studied the alien with interest. Humans were small, weak-looking creatures. Why were they here? This is Admiral Taeyang of the human fleet. We are here to protect the Talviri. Withdraw your forces and leave this system. Hraktal's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Protect them? The Talviri are defeated. Why would you risk your ships for these weak, useless creatures? You wouldn't understand, Taeyang said calmly. They showed us kindness when we had nothing to offer. That's worth more than all your warships. This puzzled Hraktal. He had conquered 17 species. Never had he encountered a civilization that fought for sentiment rather than resources. You are fools. My fleet outnumbers yours 3-1. Your ships are inferior. You will die for nothing. Then we die, Taeyang said simply. But we won't abandon them. Every minute you spend fighting us is another minute the Talviri have to escape. So let's see how long we can make this last. Hraktal cut the communication, frustrated. He didn't understand these humans at all, but it didn't matter. He would crush them like he crushed everything else. Admiral Taeyang turned to his crew. Send a message back to New Haven. Tell them what we found. Tell them we're going to hold the line here as long as we can. He paused, then added softly, and tell them our story. Make sure they remember why we came. Throughout the fleet, human ships moved into defensive positions around the scattered Talviri survivors. Engineers worked to get the damaged Talviri vessels operational. Medical teams began evacuating the wounded and sick. and pilots like Minji climbed into their fighters, knowing they were about to face overwhelming odds. Velmari stood on the flagship's bridge, watching in disbelief as humans prepared to sacrifice themselves. "Why?" she asked Admiral Taeyang directly. "Why would you do this for us?" Taeyang smiled at her. It was a sad smile but genuine, because 67 years ago your great-grandfather could have passed by a dying human ship. He could have said it wasn't his problem, but he didn't. He saved us, and because of that, 2 million humans now live on a beautiful world. We have families, children, futures, all because one Talviri decided that kindness mattered more than convenience. He looked out at the approaching Vryn fleet. "You gave us a future. The least we can do is give you one back." Velmari remembered her great-grandfather's words from his journal, about hope, about compassion, about believing the universe was fundamentally good. She had thought he was wrong. She had watched her people die and her worlds burn and had lost all faith. But now, watching a small human fleet position themselves between her people and extinction, Velmari felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The humans had come. Against all logic, across impossible distances, humanity had remembered. "Thank you," she whispered. The Vryn fleet advanced like a dark tide, 40 warships against 12. But the 12 did not run. They held their ground, weapons armed, shields raised. And deep in the debris fields, 400,000 Talviri watched and dared, for the first time in years, to believe they might survive. The battle for the Talviri homeworlds was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humanity paid its debts. The first Vryn attack came at dawn. By the clock, the humans still kept even in deep space. Corporal Kang Minji launched her fighter from the carrier bay and immediately rolled into evasive maneuvers as plasma fire lit up the darkness. The Vryn ships were fast and deadly, their weapons cutting through space in bright green streams. But human pilots had been training for combat their entire careers, and they flew like they had nothing to lose. "Delta Squadron, form up on me," Minji called over the communication channel. "Protect the evacuation ships. Don't let anything through. 3 weeks." That was how long Admiral Taeyang said they needed to hold. 3 weeks to evacuate 400,000 Talviri to safe positions, to repair enough of their ships to make them spaceworthy, to organize a retreat. It seemed impossible. But humans had survived impossible odds before. On the flagship, Admiral Taeyang watched the tactical display with Commander Baek Jun. Red markers showed Vryn ships. 12 blue markers showed his own fleet. The Reds outnumbered the Blues badly, but the humans had positioned themselves well, using the debris fields for cover and making the Vryn come to them. "Flagship Morningstar reports heavy damage to port shields," called Lieutenant Kwan Hyejin from communications. "They're holding position. Tell them to fall back behind the Dawn's Promise," Taeyang ordered. "Rotate damaged ships out and bring fresh ones forward." It was a dance of desperation. Human ships darted in and out of the debris, firing, retreating, buying time. Vryn ships pursued but had to be careful in the wreckage fields. One wrong move and they could collide with floating metal at speeds that would tear them apart. War Master Hroktal watched the battle from his command ship with growing frustration. These humans were like insects, stinging and retreating, never standing still long enough to crush. His fleet should have swept them away in hours. Instead, they had been fighting for 3 days with minimal human casualties. "Bring up the heavy cruisers," he ordered. "Punch through their defensive line. I want those evacuation ships destroyed." The Vryn heavy cruisers advanced, their thick armor shrugging off the human weapons fire. They began systematically destroying the debris the humans hid behind, creating clear firing lanes to the vulnerable Talviri transports. "Minji," Admiral Taeyang's voice came over her fighter's communication system. "We need those heavy cruisers disabled. Can your squadron make a run?" Minji looked at the massive Vryn ships bristling with weapons, their shields glowing with energy. A straight attack would be suicide. But there was never a question of refusing. "Yes, sir. We'll make it work." She gathered her squadron of 8 fighters and explained the plan. They would come in from the sun's direction, using its radiation to mask their approach. Get close enough to hit the cruiser's engine intakes with concentrated fire. It was dangerous and desperate, but that described everything about this mission. "Remember," she told her pilots, "the Talviri saved us once. Today we return the favor. Stay tight and trust each other." The fighters accelerated toward the Vryn heavy cruiser. Plasma fire filled space around them. Lieutenant Han Wujin's fighter took a hit and spiraled away, damaged but still flying. They kept going, pushed their engines until they glowed with heat, and at the last moment Minji called out, "Now, all fire on the port engine." 8 fighters unleashed everything they had into the cruiser's vulnerable engine intake. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, a flower of fire blooming in the dark. The cruiser's engine died, leaving it drifting and helpless. "One down," Minji said grimly. 5 more to go, but the cost was high. Over the next week, human casualties mounted. Ships that had launched from New Haven with full crews now operated with skeleton teams. The Morning Star was destroyed, covering an evacuation convoy, its captain refusing to abandon position even as his ship broke apart. The destroyer Last Hope rammed a Vryn battleship when its weapons failed, buying time for 3 Talviri transports to escape. On New Haven, 6 months away, the message from Admiral Taeyang finally arrived. Governor Lee Jisoo read it in her office with shaking hands. Then she walked to the Planetary Council chambers and played it for everyone to hear. Taeyang's face appeared, exhausted but determined. "This is Admiral Taeyang. We found the Talviri. They're alive but under attack by an enemy called the Vryn. We're holding the line to give them time to evacuate, but we're outnumbered and taking losses. I don't know if we'll survive this, but I want everyone back home to know why we're here. 67 years ago, the Talviri saved us without asking what they would gain. Today, we do the same for them. Whatever happens, remember our story. Remember that humanity pays its debts." Taeyang out. The council chamber sat in stunned silence. Then Governor Jisoo stood up. "Get me President Baek Soo-min at Earth. Now." The communication took hours to reach Earth and hours more for the response. But when President Baek Soo-min's message came back, her voice was firm and clear. "This is President Soo-min to all human worlds. Our people are fighting and dying across the galaxy to protect the species that once saved us. They fight outnumbered and alone. This cannot stand. I am authorizing the immediate deployment of Earth's entire fleet to Talviri space. Any colony world that wishes to contribute ships and volunteers will be welcomed. We go to bring our people home and to show the galaxy what humanity stands for." The response was overwhelming. Every human colony contributed what they could. Warships, supply vessels, medical ships. Volunteer crews numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Fleet Admiral Nam Junho, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, assembled the largest armada humanity had ever created. On the eternal horizon, a massive carrier that had never seen combat, young Captain Song Ji-hyun prepared his crew for deployment. "We're going to war," he told them simply. "Not for resources, not for territory. We're going because our people need us, and because we owe a debt to aliens we've never met. I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes the crazy thing is the right thing." Back in Talviri space, Admiral Taeyang's fleet was down to 5 operational ships. They had held for 2 weeks, buying precious time. But everyone knew they couldn't last much longer. Dr. Oh Soo-min worked around the clock in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members. She had lost count of how many surgeries she had performed. The ship's medical supplies were running low. But she kept working because that was all any of them could do. Corporal Minji landed her fighter after another patrol, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She had flown 30 combat missions in 2 weeks. Her fighter was held together with emergency patches and hope. But she climbed out of the cockpit and immediately asked when the next launch would be. Velmari worked alongside the humans now, coordinating the Talviri evacuation. She had watched in amazement as human after human sacrificed themselves to protect her people. Ships that could have escaped instead stayed to fight. Crews that could have run toward safety ran toward danger instead. It defied everything she understood about survival and self-interest. "Why?" she asked Admiral Taeyang late one night on the bridge. "You have lost so much. So many of your people are dead. Why do you keep fighting?" Taeyang looked at her with tired eyes. "Because your great-grandfather showed us that the measure of a civilization isn't its power or its wealth. It's how it treats those who need help. He proved that to us. Now we prove it back to the galaxy." On the 18th day, the Vryn launched their final assault. War Master Hraktal had grown tired of the stubborn humans. He committed his entire fleet to one massive attack, intending to crush the remaining human ships and then finish off the Talviri at his leisure. "All ships," Admiral Taeyang ordered. "This is it. Hold nothing back. Make every shot count." The 5 remaining human warships formed a defensive sphere around the last Talviri evacuation point. Vryn ships swarmed them from all directions, hundreds of weapons firing simultaneously. Human shields failed, armor buckled, ships began dying. "Sir," Commander Back called out, "we can't hold them. We need to retreat." "There's nowhere to retreat to," Taeyang said calmly. "We hold here or the Talviri die. So we hold." On her fighter, Minji made one last attack run against a Vryn battleship. Her weapons were almost depleted, her engines overheating, but she pushed forward. Then her sensor alarm began screaming. New contacts were appearing at the edge of the system. "Lots of them. Admiral," she said, her voice shaking. "We have incoming ships." "Lots of them." "I'm reading. Over 300 vessels." Taeyang's heart sank. More Vryn reinforcements. It was over. But then Lieutenant Hijin started laughing and crying at the same time. "Sir, those aren't Vryn ships. They're broadcasting human identification codes. It's Earth. The fleet from Earth is here." 300 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. At their head flew Fleet Admiral Nam Junho's flagship, the Indomitable. The enormous dreadnought's weapons were already charging, its fighters launching in massive waves. "This is Fleet Admiral Nam Junho to Admiral Taeyang. Sorry we're late. We came as fast as we could. Now let's show these Vryn what happens when you threaten our friends." On the bridge of his dying flagship, Admiral Taeyang started laughing. Around him, his exhausted crew began to cheer. They had held for 18 days against impossible odds. And now help had arrived. Velamari watched the human armada spread across her sensors. The battle for the Talviri homeworlds lasted 72 hours and changed the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Nam Junho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched 300 human warships tear into the Vryn fleet like wolves attacking prey. The Vryn had believed themselves unbeatable, had grown arrogant from conquering peaceful species. Now they faced humans who had crossed half the galaxy. For one reason, to honor a debt. War Master Hroktal is attempting to retreat, reported Commander Park Sujin. His flagship is breaking. Orbit, Corporal Minji. Juno said into the communication channel. "You've been fighting these insects for 18 days. Want to help us finish this?" In her battered fighter, Minji felt energy surge through her exhausted body. "Yes, sir. Delta Squadron, form up. Let's show them how humans fight." The fighters swept forward in perfect formation. They had learned the Vryn attack patterns through hard experience. Now they used that knowledge with devastating efficiency. Minji's targeting computer locked onto the Vryn flagship's shield generators. One shot, perfectly placed. The shields flickered and failed. "All heavy ships," Admiral Junho ordered. "Concentrate fire on that flagship. Take it down." 20 dreadnoughts unleashed their main weapons simultaneously. The Vryn flagship, War Master Hroktal's pride, broke apart in a cascade of explosions. Hroktal had time for one final thought before the end. These humans were not what he expected. They were not weak. They were not foolish. They were simply loyal to a degree he could not comprehend. With their commander dead and facing impossible odds, the remaining Vryn ships broke formation and fled. Fleet Admiral Junho let them go. There had been enough killing. The Talviri worlds were free. On Admiral Taeyang's damaged flagship, the exhausted crew collapsed in relief. They had held for 18 days on 5 ships against a superior enemy. Now it was over. Lieutenant Hyejin cried openly at her station. Commander Bayek sat down heavily, too tired to even smile. And Taeyang himself simply stared at the view screen, where human ships now filled the sky like protective stars. Velmari walked onto the bridge, her crystalline skin glowing with emotion. "You saved us," she said quietly. "All of you. My people were dying, scattered, hopeless, and you came. Humans from worlds we never visited, people we never met, crossed the galaxy to help us." Admiral Taeyang stood and bowed to her, a gesture of deep respect. "Your great-grandfather saved us first. We just returned the favor. The cost had been terrible. 40,000 human casualties. 7 ships completely destroyed from Taeyang's original fleet. The Morning Star, Last Hope, Dawn's Promise, Eternal Vigilance, Starchild, New Beginning, and Forever Home would never return to port. But the Talviri lived. 400,000 survivors who could rebuild their civilization. In the days after the battle, the real work began. Human construction ships arrived with supplies and equipment. Medical vessels treated wounded Talviri and humans alike. Engineers from Earth worked alongside Talviri technicians to repair damaged orbital stations and restore power to the surviving homeworlds. Governor Lee Jisoo arrived from New Haven with a civilian aid flotilla. She met Velmarie in person for the first time, and the two women embraced as sisters. "Your great-grandfather saved my grandmother," Jisoo said. "She told me stories about him until the day she died. Said he was the kindest being she ever met." "She was right," Velmarie said, wiping tears from her eyes. "He believed that compassion was the highest virtue, that helping others defined the worth of a civilization. I thought he was naive. I thought the galaxy had proven him wrong. But you proved he was right all along." The Treaty of Stars was signed 6 months later on the restored Talviri homeworld. Humanity and the Talviri formally allied, pledging mutual defense and support. But unlike most treaties, this one included unusual clauses. Human colonists could settle on Talviri worlds if they wished, helping to rebuild the population. The Talviri would share their advanced medical and energy technologies freely with humanity. Joint research stations would be established. Cultural exchange programs would teach Talviri and human children together. Most importantly, both species pledged to follow what became known as the Compassion Doctrine. They would help other species in need, regardless of strategic advantage. They would be the civilizations that remembered kindness. Ambassador Ro Yuna, representing humanity at the Galactic Council, shocked the Assembly by presenting this doctrine publicly. The Talviri saved humans 67 years ago when we couldn't help ourselves. Humanity just saved the Talviri from extinction. We didn't do these things for resources or territory. We did them because compassion creates bonds stronger than any treaty. We invite all species to join us in this principle. The council chamber erupted in argument. The Kalathi representative stood up, his scales flushing with color. "This is absurd. You expect civilizations to risk their resources for others with no guarantee of return." "Yes," Yuna said simply, "because the return isn't resources. It's knowing you live in a galaxy where someone will help you when you need it most. That's worth more than any amount of wealth." Several species dismissed the idea as naive human idealism, but a few, those who had watched humanity cross the galaxy for aliens they'd never met, began to reconsider. Maybe the humans in Talviri understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. On New Haven, a ceremony was held for those who died in the battle. The memorial hall was expanded to include a new wing honoring the fallen. 40,000 names were carved into crystal pillars that glowed with soft light. At the center stood a statue of Admiral Taeyang and Velmarie standing together, their hands clasped. Old Yun Hana attended the ceremony in a wheelchair. She was 75 now, weak and tired, but she had insisted on coming. When it was time for her to speak, she stood slowly and approached the memorial with her framed drawing, the one she had made as a child aboard the Eternal Dawn. 67 years ago, I was a little girl on a dying ship, she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. I drew a picture of humans and aliens helping each other because I believed someone would come save us. Velinor, a Talviri I never met, saw that picture and cried. He told Dr. Jiwoo that it gave him hope. She held up the drawing so everyone could see the simple stick figures holding hands under stars. Today, those stick figures are real. Humans and Talviri working together, living together, protecting each other. That little girl's dream came true, and it came true because we remembered, because we honored what was given to us, because we proved that kindness is never wasted. Hana sat down slowly and the crowd stood in silence for a long moment. Then as one, they began to applaud. The sound grew and grew until it filled the memorial hall and spilled outside where thousands more had gathered to watch. Hana died peacefully 2 weeks later, surrounded by family. Her drawing was placed in the memorial hall next to the crystalline data core Velinor had given them so long ago. Velmarie came to the funeral and spoke of how her great-grandfather's journals mentioned the little human girl who believed in kindness. Two people separated by species and generations, connected by a simple drawing and an unshakable faith in compassion. 50 years passed. The Talviri civilization rebuilt and flourished, growing even stronger than before. Human colonies spread across Talviri space and Talviri settlements appeared on human worlds. The two species became so interconnected that younger generations barely noticed the difference between them. They simply were partners, friends, family. The galaxy changed too. More species joined the Compassion Doctrine after seeing its results. When the peaceful Mirathi faced drought and famine, human and Talviri ships arrived with aid. When the warlike Krell found themselves threatened by a plague, human doctors and Talviri medical technology saved millions. Slowly, a new way of thinking spread across the stars. On the restored Talviri homeworld, a massive monument was unveiled. It depicted three figures, Velanor reaching out to Captain Han Doyen with young Hana between them holding her drawing. The figures were carved from crystal and metal, standing 50 feet tall, visible from orbit. The inscription at the base was written in both Talviri and human languages. They showed humanity kindness once, and were repaid with legend. May all civilizations remember, compassion is never wasted, and debts of honor are always worth paying. Corporal Kang Minji, now Admiral Minji and the youngest fleet commander in human history, attended the unveiling with Fleet Admiral Junho, who was preparing to retire. They stood before the monument as speeches were given in a dozen languages. "Do you think it made a difference?" Minji asked quietly. "All of this? The fighting, the sacrifice, everything we did." Junho looked around at the crowd. Humans and Talviri stood together, children of both species playing without distinction. "Look at them," he said. "We didn't just save a species. We proved that in this dark galaxy, there are still those who choose kindness over convenience, that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Yes, Admiral, I think it made a difference." At the ceremony, Velmari stood with Governor Lee Jisoo, both of them older now but still strong. They watched as a new generation learned the story. Young human children listened with wide eyes as Talviri elders told them about the day the humans came. Young Talviri students wrote essays about Captain Doyen and the Eternal Dawn.